Hi guys, welcome back to lecture 4 on the digestive tract. We finished off last time talking about the stomach, and now we're going to move down into the small intestine. And this is a nice image of small intestines. Um, you can see they're covered with that serous membrane, right? The pearly membrane that secretes that thin, watery mucus. Uh, the visceral membrane of the small intestine actually has a special name called the mesentery. It has lots of cool roles in terms of uh, vitamin production, maybe even leptin. So maybe it maybe play a role in obesity, and it becomes with chronic inflammation, it becomes extended. And maybe we'll allude to that when we get down there. But just beneath the stomach, we enter the small intestine. The stomach prepares the food for absorption, right? So the stomach has pretty much done the mechanical digestion of the food and a lot of the chemical digestion. And then we're going to do two things. Number one, the chyme in the stomach is highly acidic, so we need to change that. And that's the role of the pancreas. And then we still need to keep breaking food down as it enters the small intestine, which is about 20 feet long, and allow us to take out as much nutrition as we can from the food that we've ingested. So anyway, the first section of the small intestine is called the duodenum. And in the duodenum, one of the first things that happens is that the gut has sensory receptors down there, and it senses what type of food is coming out of the stomach and reacts accordingly. Right? There's a structure called the common bile duct that carries bile from the gallbladder, which is an extension of the liver, and carries pancreatic juices here, and they both dump out into the small intestine just beneath the pyloric sphincter. And the pancreas we've talked about from, I think, day one. Remember that the pancreas is an important endocrine organ that controls blood glucose regulation, right? Remember the alpha cells in the pancreatic acini, or the islets of Langerhans. The alpha cells secrete glucagon, which helps you to store glucose as glycogen. And the beta cells produce insulin, which helps you to, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Insulin tells cells to take sugar up and potentially stored as glycogen. Glucagon, on the other hand, is released in response to hypoglycemia, and it'll break down glycogen into single monosaccharides. There's the delta cells. They release somatostatin, and somatostatin has some buffering effects for those two other hormones. But the pancreas doesn't just do endocrine function, it has a digestive function, and it makes a special juice, pancreatic juice, which is full of a combination of different types of enzymes. So lipases break down fats, proteases break down proteins, nucleases break down nucleic acids, and then finally we have things like amylase that break down carbohydrates. So it makes enzymes, it makes hormones, it secretes something called pancreatic juice, which also contains some bicarbonate ion to neutralize the stomach acid. Pancreatic juice produced in the islets of Langerhans, right? Also known as the pancreatic acinus. And a sinus is just a sac. We're going to see acini in the liver as well. And you should be able to tell me what these enzymes do. So pancreatic amylase, if you remember, there's amylase secreted by the parotid glands up in your mouth, breaks down the complex carbohydrates, right? So the amylase in your mouth breaks down starch, and the amylase in your pancreas can break glycogen. Pancreatic lipase, of course, breaks down fats, and specifically triacylglycerides. Trypsin and chymotrypsin, carboxypeptidase are all proteases. There's nucleases there that break down the nucleic acids and their constituent nucleotides. And then last but not least, our body, the bicarbonate ion. When it's dumped down in there, it'll neutralize that stomach acid. And so for anybody who's suffered with indigestion, one of the things you can do to mediate that is to put a teaspoon of baking soda into some water and drink that. It's cheap antacid. It'll neutralize the acid in your stomach. So pancreatic juice inherently is an alkaline solution. And there is a negative feedback loop here regulating pancreatic secretions, all right? So when that chyme is dumped into the duodenum, it causes the release of a hormone called secretin, which enters the bloodstream. It stimulates the pancreas to secrete its juice, and that neutralizes the acid because it's carrying that bicarbonate ion, and then the secretin is stopped being secreted. Remember that the common bile duct carries pancreatic juice, but it also obviously carries bile, and it's carrying bile from the liver. And we could spend a whole unit on the liver. It's the largest organ in the body. It's, it kind of covers you from stem to stern, really, from one side of the chest to the other chest, just underneath the diaphragm. And it actually can protrude out a little bit just below the costal margins, right? So if you look at the right lobe of the liver and you palpitate your rib cage, that costal cartilage margins, the edge of your rib cage, you can palpitate the liver. And if you ever go see a physician, they'll do that. And you can also see that just over there on the right lobe, this little green guy is peeking out there, and that's the gallbladder. All right. There's two major lobes. There's a giant ligament, the falciform ligament, to connect the two lobes. And the liver does so many things. We'll wait for a second. Liver is a bizarre organ. You can have 2/3 of it removed and pieces will grow back. It's critical for cleaning your blood out. It's critical for the storage of sugars. It's critical for the detoxification of toxic substances in your body, like peroxide. And again, it's organized into these structures called acini. Remember, the liver has a major role in detoxifying and filtering your blood for good substances as well. And it does that through this massive vena cava that comes through the center of the organ. And then blood is channeled out into the liver and comes back through something called the portal veins. And we've alluded to this idea of portal hypertension contributing to varicose veins in the esophagus. All right, so I've got. Let's take a look. So blood moves through the liver via the central vein, and blood moves from the central vein of the liver out into portal veins, and as it passes out through these acini, these little sacs, it passes through hepatocytes, which filter the blood. They take out sugars. They take out other important nutrients, proteins, nucleic acids, etc. And they also filter out waste products to form this substance called bile. And so as blood moves again from the central vein to the portal veins, we have filtering of the blood both for toxins and waste products as well as for nutrients. And one of the products is going to be bile, and one of the products is going to be clean blood that returns back through the vena cava to the rest of the body. So you may be wondering why I've got a video of a mixed martial artist boxer here in the lower right. And the reason is that he delivers a very nice shot to the liver right there. And that usually takes the fight out of you. In fact, there's a guy who actually performed a bunch of self-surgeries And I'm sorry we're not at class. This is one of my go-to stories every year. So the guy's first self-surgery was to castrate himself. And then he removed his appendix by himself on his, set up in his own little operating room in his bedroom. And his, he decided he didn't want his adrenal glands anymore, so he injected them with some sort of substance, and they became infected. So he wanted to remove his adrenal glands. And he said that he got as far as the liver, and when he started to try to move the liver around to get his adrenal glands, it was just too painful. So anyway, getting punched in the liver is very painful. So imagine if you were doing self-surgery, moving your liver lobules by hand would probably be painful as well. Don't do that. That's crazy. So, what are some of the liver functions? It stores glycogen from glucose, right? So remember, it responds to insulin. It will uptake glucose and make those long chains. So taking the simple monosaccharide to make the complex polysaccharide. Remember, glycogen is the storage form for glucose in animals. Of course, in response to glucagon, it will break down glycogen into glucose and release it to the bloodstream. So the liver is central in the homeostasis of blood glucose levels. And it also turns other stuff into glucose. You break down protein, you turn it into glucose. You break down fats, you turn it into glucose. You break down all kinds of stuff, you turn it right back into glucose. And so it has lots of different roles when it comes to glucose metabolism. It also breaks down fatty acid. It oxidizes fatty acids, and it makes lipoproteins and phospholipids and cholesterol. So remember that, when you have hypercholesteremia, that is high blood glucose or high blood cholesterol levels, one of the problems might be liver dysfunction as well. It takes carbohydrates and proteins and also turns them into fat. Okay, and so if you have too much sugar in your blood all the time, one of the things your body will do to efficiently take advantage of that extra energy storage is to make fat. And in the meantime, it'll also raise those resting triglycerides and cholesterol levels in your blood. It deaminates amino acids to form urea, right? Why does your pee smell like ammonia? Well, because of the substance called urea, which is based on those amino groups, right? The ammonia groups that come off of amino acids. So it helps break down amino acids. It makes plasma proteins. It can convert some amino acids into others. It stores vitamin A, D, and B. In fact, if you're ever stuck in the Arctic and you kill a polar bear to eat him, don't eat his liver, because the liver of a polar bear has toxic levels of vitamin A. Vitamin A, it's that beta carotene, right? And they accumulate it because they eat seals, and seals are eating stuff that comes from the marine algae food chain, and marine algae makes a bunch of vitamin A and store it, because remember, there's limited sunlight up there, and vitamin A is produced by or relies on that to a degree. Anyway, don't eat the livers of a polar bear; it'll kill you. Of course, the liver is also important in taking out the breakdown products of red blood cells, and it removes them and makes this stuff called bile. And you can tell if somebody has liver dysfunction because they look like this. Yes, this is a jaundice. Jean in France is yellow, and this person has jaundice. And what you see there is the buildup of the pigment called bilirubin. All right, so remember that hemoglobin is the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen, and when it's broken down, one of its sub products is another protein, a yellow protein called bilirubin. And of course, bilirubin is what makes bile its greenish yellowish color. And if I don't, and the liver's constantly taking this waste product out as red blood cells die. Remember, red blood cells live for about 2 months, and then they die, and the liver has to take that stuff out of there. And if it doesn't do a good job, you start to turn yellow. So if you see if you see your pop up and he's all kind of yellow, you might want to make sure to take him to go see his doctor. Okay, I'll see you next time.